Hey, welcome to our very first episode of Three in a Row. And here we are going to be sharing three of the most important articles of the day. We're going to be trying to share them in a fair, objective way, well, as I see it at least.
I'm sick of being cautious. I'ma go cause something, can't stop this.
Whether you are a conservative or a liberal, Democrat, Republican, doesn't really matter. Here we're going to be talking about the issues. We're going to be open minded. We're going to be sharing what works, what doesn't work, what we observe. And in each article, try to open our eyes and try to see what's really going on, what's really out there, what's going on behind the scenes. Now, our first article comes from NPR, and it is a push to ban members of Congress from participating in individual stock trades. Well, the reason they're pushing for it is because there's the appearance of a potential conflict of interest. If you have the people who are supposed to be regulating and making a fair market in this democracy that we live in, they are supposed to be objective. They're supposed to be fair. They're supposed to be setting the boundaries for companies, businesses, even entire markets that those markets are supposed to abide by. And if they are making the rules, is it fair for them to then potentially have a little bit of inside information, a little bit of inside baseball, and maybe get ahead of the market because they have information that we don't have, and they actually have powers really define entire markets and segments of the market. Now, about 10 years ago, there was a push to create what was called the Stock Act. And what it did, it was an attempt by Congress to self-regulate. And all it really did was say that if an individual member of Congress was going to buy, sell, trade a stock, all they had to do was report it at some point in the future. And there are some rules around it, but there's really no enforcement. There's no penalty if you don't. Now they're trying to actually put some teeth behind it and really change the way that this is enforced. Now there's a bipartisan push again, this time to ban lawmakers from trading individual stocks at all. Proponents say it's important to take the step to remove all doubt or charges of conflicts of interest that could stem from members using information from classified briefings or committee meetings to make money in the market. It's kind of crazy that this is actually a thing, that they've been able to trade stocks all this time. That seems like a major oversight over the last 100 years. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican California, said, "I cannot imagine being a Speaker of the House with the power of what can come before committee, you name them, and what can come to the floor and trading millions of dollars worth of options. I just don't think the American people think that's right." Really? Yeah, we don't think it's right. How do you think it's right? How does anybody think it's right? Texas GOP Representative Pete Sessions disagrees with the need for a new law. He said, "I don't believe it's necessary." Sessions, however, admitted he failed to disclose a trade within the required period under the current rules. "I should have recorded it, but I didn't have the paperwork on it or something. I think I asked for a waiver at least once, maybe twice. I reported it within a reasonable period of time." California Republican Darrell Issa, one of the wealthiest members of Congress, stopped trading stocks once he got elected. "I made that decision because it made an abundance of simplicity that you have no conflicts." So I guess he didn't need to. However, all congressmen, whether in the House or the Senate, they all have pretty reasonable salaries. They're making multiple six-figure incomes, which is way better than most of Americans. The White House Economic Director Brian Deese said, "One of the things that we need to do across the board is restore faith in our institutions, whether that be Congress and the legislative branch or whether it be the Fed and others. And so anything we can do to try to restore faith, I think makes a lot of sense." And that was followed by Jen Psaki when she said, "Biden believes that everyone should be held to the highest standard." But she added, "He'll let members of leadership in Congress and members of Congress determine what the rules should be. How about the American people determine what it should be? I happen to believe that there are representatives, if you have faith in the voting process and you have faith that they are being honest with those results," which I generally think that there's always a little bit of fraud, but I think overall that the elections are usually pretty fair and the results are at least fairly accurate. Now, this is a topic that is gaining a lot of bipartisan support. Now, most of the quotes that I pulled from this were from Republicans. However, this is a bipartisan push, and you have members of Congress, even as far left as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I don't think I've ever agreed with on anything in my entire life. That said, she is supportive of this. She is in favor of this, and for very good reason. It's not okay for our representatives in Congress, probably our Supreme Court justices, the president, and members of the cabinet should not have the ability to buy and trade stocks. If you want to put money in a mutual fund and let somebody else independently invest for you and manage your finances, that's fine. But if you have the ability to strike down laws like on the Supreme Court, or make laws or enforce laws, then you should not have the ability to profit off of those laws while you're in office. I believe, and maybe you do too, that when you are elected, your assets should go into a separate bucket to be managed outside of your hands. And while you're in office, focus on your job that we elected you to do and not on profiting from being a member of Congress or the president or in the cabinet. I mean, we do have members of Congress and the presidency, like, maybe like President Biden, who profited 31 million from the Chinese government when he was vice president through his family, which raises a lot of questions. But I don't think any of us think that that's okay. I don't think any of us think that members of Congress should profit. Now, part of this is to also block family members of Congress from being able to buy and sell. I mean, let's say, for example, you have a wife who's a maybe Speaker of the House. Let's just say Nancy Pelosi, and she doesn't buy or sell stocks, and but her husband does. And the Pelosi's are now worth over $100 million because of the successful stock trades and investments that he has made while she has been in Congress. They weren't that wealthy before when she took office, and now worth over $100 million. And it was all through his investments. And maybe he's that good, but also it raises the question of, was there some impropriety going on? And when they asked her about it, her response was, well, it's a free market and we should be able to participate. And I believe that is the first, only, and last time I will ever hear Nancy Pelosi argue on the side of the free market. Anyway, enough of that. Whether you are for more government spending, against government spending, left, right, Republican, Democrat, I think we can all agree that having members of Congress who are making the rules, setting the table for the market, setting the rules and regulations, going after potential, monopolies, breaking up monopolies, are these the same people that should be able to then buy and sell and move millions of dollars around to benefit ahead of the rest of the market? No, I don't think any of us think that's fair. Now, I love our next article tonight because we're talking about COVID and Israel. Now, for those of you that are following COVID vaccinations, Israel has one of the most aggressive vaccine mandates and the most pro-vaccine governments in the entire world. And I love this article for one reason. Israel now has the highest per capita infection rate in the world. A top health expert advising the government cited figures showing 0.6% of the population was testing positive per day. The numbers comparing each country's 7-day running average put Israel at the top. Well, that's really interesting because if the vaccine works and the vaccine is so great at stopping infection, shouldn't they have lower than average? At least not be number one, right? I mean, that seems crazy. But the expert noted it was likely that Israel was not truly the country with the highest infection rate. Rather, he attributed the figures to Israel being a leading country in the number of tests performed each day relative to its population size. Oh, the numbers really aren't that out of whack. It's just that we test more than everybody else. Wrong. No, I don't buy that for a second. Now, they may be skewed a little bit. You could say that there's a little bit of deviation there. Maybe they're not number one. They just test more because they do test a lot. Fair enough. There's a lot of fuzziness around the actual numbers of COVID because the reporting system isn't perfect. Whether it's Israel or the United States, it's not perfect. The whole reason I'm pointing this out is 44% of adults in Israel have had at least the full 2-part vaccine plus a booster. And at least 60% of Israel has had the full 2-part vaccine. So their numbers are relatively high in comparison with the rest of the world. I've had the vaccine. My wife's had the vaccine. I'm not anti-vaccine by any means. However, the data, and again, we keep being told by the government, by Fauci, President Biden, and everybody, follow the science, right? Follow the science. The numbers, the statistics don't bear out that the vaccine is working particularly well. I'm not saying don't get the vaccine at all. By all means, if you feel like you should get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If you don't, it's an individual decision. That's your choice. There are risks of getting the vaccines and there are risks of not getting the vaccines. But all that said, it's up to you right now as to whether or not you get the vaccine. Our last article tonight, my favorite of the night, I don't know, that whole Congress buying and selling stock one, that was a pretty good one. I like that one a lot. But our last article up tonight is about how we don't trust our political leaders, we don't trust the media, and we do not trust big businesses. A majority of people globally believe journalists 67%, government leaders 66%, and business executives 63% are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. I'm honestly surprised that it's that low. I would have thought more people mistrusted them because I don't believe anything that comes out of politicians' mouths anymore until I see the data, I see the science, I see the studies, I see the results of policy recommendations, I see the effectiveness. Businesses are lying, the government is lying, and the media, for the most part, are lying as well. Around the world, people fear the media is becoming more sensational for commercial gain and that government leaders continue to exploit divisions for political gain. I'm not sure why a study had to say that. I think we all know that. The media is the whole purpose of the 24-hour news cycle is to push fear and divisiveness and create stories. How many times do we see stories that the media actually created themselves? People who live in democracies are quickly losing trust in those democracies, while trust in authoritarian regimes in China, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, for example, is increasing among the people who live under them. You can't be serious. We're supposed to believe the Chinese. Well, I mean, technically, it's the people who live under the regimes. I think if a person in China or Saudi Arabia or the UAE were called on the phone by some random stranger and said, "Hey, we're doing a poll. Do you trust your government?" The people in China, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, or any other authoritarian regime are like, yeah. Yeah, we trust you. Yep, we trust our government fully. You can't believe that poll number. There's no way. I don't believe that at all. As people become more skeptical of institutions, they are increasingly leaning into closer circles of trust. To me, that's the most important part of the article is the fact that people are leaning into closer circles of trust. I think that's why you've seen an explosion in new media. I think you've seen a lot of people are looking for new places to trust because they don't trust the traditional media outlets, whether they be legacy media, conservative media, liberal media, whatever it is. People don't trust them. They're looking for new, honest places where they can find somewhat unbiased, fair, reasoned discussions. And I really hope that the conversations we have here on Three in a Row will be that. It'll be something where you can trust what I'm talking about. You can trust what the conversations that we're having. We can have open, fair, and honest dialogue and not just political dialogue, right? Like we're all trying to live better lives. It's not just politics. It's not just government. It's about how we want to be free and independent thinkers and we want to be free people. And we don't want to live under authoritarian regimes. We don't want the government to grow bigger and more demanding and more in control of our lives, our liberties, and our freedoms. What do you think about these three stories? Do you think Congress should ban individual trading of stocks? What do you think about this whole trust of government and political and business leaders? And don't you find it just a little bit concerning that with Israel's high vaccination rate, they still have such an incredibly high incidence of COVID? If you ended up enjoying the video, please smash that like button. Subscribe to Three in a Row if you haven't. And until next time,
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad, chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back, I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me, ain't nobody like that.